domestication of the dog in the region of modern-day China potentially predates the 5th millennium BC. A cornerstone of the early Chinese conceptualization of dogs is their placement at the threshold of life and death. Dogs were often buried in waste pits in early Chinese tombs, later replaced by ceramic effigies as tomb accessories. Later still, dogs became occupants of their own tombs, a practice that was at first derided but eventually became accepted and even celebrated. This understudied transition from tombkeeper to tomb accessory to tomb occupant thus reveals the changing conceptualization of dogs in early China. During the Shang and Zhou periods, dogs were primarily a livestock animal, a sacrificial offering specified as gengxian, or were buried in consecration ceremonies for buildings and tombs. The ubiquity of tomb waste pits containing dog skeletons or ceremonial pits of dismembered dogs under thresholds is staggering, showing that dogs were first and foremost a ceremonial victim rather than a source of food or sacrifice to the ancestors. During the Eastern Zhou period, figurines gradually replaced human and animal sacrifice in consecrating tombs. But this process of replacement was not linear. For example, dog skeletons and those of other domestic animals were found in tombs excavated at Bailu Yuan from the Han period. This means that the replacement of ceremonial dogs with figurines was not complete, even at this later period. The eating of dogs continued into the Han period. However, it is difficult to ascertain exactly how widespread geographically or socially these practices were. Excavated Qin and Han sources seeking to limit or curtail dog slaughter and consumption implicitly suggest that these activities were relatively commonplace. Han brick art from modern Shandong features images of dog slaughter among domestic scenes, and the depiction of dogs alongside models of cooking stoves also proves that the eating of dogs existed before and during the Han period, even if the scale of this practice cannot be ascertained. The role of the dog in consumption, sacrifice, and consecration ceremonies diminishes in the post-Han period. This may be because alternate sources of meat and sacrifice were more readily available, or because living dogs were playing an increasingly visible role in hunting and in the guarding of the home. In a broad sense, Confucian thinkers in the Han period argued for the dominance of humans over animals. Humans could understand social hierarchies and codified relationships involving concepts like patriotism, friendship, or wider family arrangements. Animals, like dogs, therefore functioned as tools supplied to humans for practical ends, in this case, hunting and guarding. While hunting was undeniably linked with the royal clan in Shang and Zhou times, even then the sport had its adherents among the wider populace. Art of the Han period also presents us with dogs in a variety of roles in the hunt, which was no longer the sport exclusively of rulers. Beyond the realm of sport, dogs were also used in the domestic sphere for guarding and ratting. Ceramic figures of guard dogs became ubiquitous in tombs of the Eastern Han period, particularly those from Henan and Shanxi. In this period, tombs began to resemble visual documents of life, and so figurines within the tomb were used to represent property of the deceased, as well as elements of burial ceremonies. This may be why an increasing number of earthenware dogs were placed in the tomb, either to represent the ceremonial dog which was once commonly buried in Shang and Western Zhou tombs, or to represent guard dogs owned in life. Many of the individual ceramic figures are strikingly similar. While giving little indication of scale, the fact that many wear a harness attests both to the strength of these dogs and to the fact that they were tethered for guarding, as well as hinting at their large size. Several domestic scenes feature a guard dog prone in front of an entrance, a very different location compared with general livestock, which were placed at the rear of the miniature house. Dogs had thus become key tomb accessories in the late Han period. But what happened when a working dog died? Some were certainly eaten, given that tin statues discovered in Tomb 11, Shui Hu Di, discuss the consumption of hunting dogs killed by park wardens, and the metaphor, the running dog is boiled, references a non-livestock dog being cooked for consumption. This metaphor refers to ministers being discarded by the ruler, even though the consumption of dogs doesn't draw criticism elsewhere. However, some dogs were spared post-mortem consumption and were buried. This was by no means universally accepted or practiced. Nevertheless, earlier Eastern Zhou texts do reference the burial of dogs. Li Ji records Confucius ordering a dog he had raised to be buried after its death. Furthermore, in Yanzi Chunqiu, Yan Ying is said to have criticized Zhu Jing of Qi's desire to have his running dog buried in a coffin with accompanying ceremonial sacrifices. Such criticism arose from the inequity that Yan Ying and other philosophers saw in expending resources, particularly in death, on an animal in place of humans. But excavations showed that people did bury their dogs. For instance, Hou Yi's tomb shows a female dog buried in a wooden coffin accompanied with 2 stone discs and a bone object, and the king of Zhongshan's tomb features 2 dogs buried in golden necklaces. A Xin period burial of a small dog at Yueyangcheng has been ascertained to be a dog's grave rather than a ceremonial pit, and despite its simplicity, the placement of 31 small figurines in the tomb suggests a burial with some level of pomp and circumstance. 2 possible motivations may lie behind these burials. The first is that, much like other status-conferring objects, dogs represented wealth and prestige if the dogs were particularly well-bred or uncommon. The second is that these burials represent a degree of repayment offered to the working dog in return for their services. Parallel to human servants, there are signs that many dog owners felt a proper burial fitting the master's social status was expected after a working dog's death. A memorial given in Hanshu underlines this point, stating that, since dogs and horses toil for humans, they ought to also have the repayment of a drape covering them after death. The concept of toil as being essential in justifying burying dogs and horses is also put forward by Zhong Xuan, who states, "A raised dog is one trained to guard, a rode horse is one ridden by a gentleman. Other dogs and horses cannot be covered with a drape." Han thinkers thus show a nascent conceptualization of dogs paralleling human servants in death. However, a greater individualization of dogs in large part arose in the fluid landscape of the post-Han period. Viewed as something more than a resource or tool, working dogs could be treated as similar to human servants in life as well as in death. Several dogs appear in so-called anomaly accounts from the 3rd century onward. A mixture of fiction, exaggeration, observation, and fact, these tales record and praise dogs performing heroic tasks on behalf of their owners. Dogs, and indeed other animals, were beginning to be attributed with a limited understanding of filial piety when involved in direct, reciprocal relationships. These canine-centered tales share parallel plot lines with those centered on human servants, and, like human servants, dogs owe their service and filial loyalty to their owner, with this behavior often being repaid. Instead of a simple contract of service for a proper burial, the human-dog relationship has grown and absorbed elements of the human master-servant relationship. Examples of dogs performing a heroic task and being buried include the hunting dog Yellow Ears, which delivers a letter for its homesick master Ling Ji, covering a great distance in a very short amount of time. The dog is explicitly said to understand human speech and communicates with humans to first agree to take the letter, then to obtain crossing over lakes and rivers, and finally to obtain a letter in reply from Lingzi's family. When the dog later dies, it is buried in its owner's village graveyard. Furthermore, a dog named Black Dragon saves its drunken owner from a wildfire by shaking water onto the surrounding grass and, when its owner then falls into a well, barking to attract help from a passerby. This dog belongs to Li Xinchun, and the dog dies from exhaustion having saved its owner. Li Xinchun is devastated on seeing Black Dragon dead, and, from his damp fur, surmises what has happened. He tells the governor of this matter, who replies, "The reciprocity of dogs is greater than that of humans. If humans don't know gratitude, are they really better than dogs?" Black Dragon is then buried in a burial mound. Tales like these show that dogs have begun to be viewed in a more three-dimensional manner, going from being tools that through their very existence owe service to humans, to being capable of understanding and enacting filial behaviour. The lack of criticism applied to the extravagant burial of dogs shows an evolution from Han and pre-Han burials, in that these do not highlight the wealth or prestige of the owner, nor are they a measured requisite reward for an animal's labour. A further example of dog burial is that of Swan Grey, who was buried after suddenly transforming into a dragon, a monumental task not tied to an act of heroism. Clearly, the burial of dogs was increasingly visible, given the fact that they are referenced much more frequently. The attribution of moral qualities attests to the gradual conceptualization of the dog-owner bond as reflecting that of the servant-master relationship in life as well as in death. The transition from tombkeeper through tomb accessory to tomb occupant thus underlines the changing relationship between humans and dogs up to the 6th century in China.